Alrighty, welcome back. That was Break Something by Anti-Flag, an excellent little song about neoliberal rule. Now, let's move over and talk about our national story this week. Our final story and our national story this week deals with the progressives finally drawing a line in the sand. Our national stories over the last several months have been tracking two federal spending packages. First, we have the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill, which has been negotiated with Republican lawmakers to include primarily what we think of as traditional infrastructure. Planes, trains, automobiles, roads, bridges, basic shit like that. The second bill is a $3.5 trillion social spending package, which is not being supported by the Republicans. This has elements of childcare, the Green New Deal, and a multiplicity of other social spending that progressives want to see. Biden's strategy was to compromise with the Republicans and pass the $1 trillion infrastructure package to demonstrate bipartisan support, and then the $3.5 trillion package to appease the Progressive Caucus. The problem with this strategy is the fact that not just the Biden administration, but neoliberals across time will offer something for the progressives, but say we need to pass this thing first, and then never follow through on their promises to progressives. This has been an ongoing problem throughout the Trump administration, throughout the Obama administration, and really time out of mind. So, this week, the Progressive Caucus in Congress, led by Washington's own Pramila Jayapal, agreed to vote no when the infrastructure bill was called to the floor by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The nearly 100-person Progressive Caucus voted against bringing the bill to the floor, delaying the vote. The progressive conditions to bringing this bill to vote are contingent on the social spending package being passed first. This would ensure that progressive priorities are met and that the Democrats deliver for their constituents as opposed to compromising with the Republicans. This forced the vote action by progressives had a tangible impact on policy outcomes. Biden is pulling back from the infrastructure bill and negotiating with moderate Democrats to push out the social spending bill. Critics of this move, including many moderate Democrats, have indicated that the delay only hurts Biden's chances of getting his policies through because you need momentum and you need to keep that momentum going. However, others say that getting both done is more important than the order that they are passed. Those are two different camps of moderate Democrats. The progressives are very much saying that, no, we need the social spending first. You're going to pay us first before you pay the fucking moderates and the Republicans. So, Dane, what do you make of this stance? Because we've both been very, in favor of both these spending packages.
Yeah. I like to see this line in the sand being drawn. I like it. It shows me that just the traction that we've gotten from it shows me that we actually have some pull in this situation. And I hope that the conversations that are being had aren't to figure out a way around our disagreement and are figuring out a way to get this social spending bill through first.
Absolutely. One of the key things to keep in mind is that the House is pretty much split down the middle. So even losing a few House members voting no on this would have been really just not great. But having 100 members of the House of the Democratic House Caucus of the 100 members of the Democratic caucus making up the Progressive Caucus within that was really, really probably jarring to Pelosi, who's, hailed by liberals as this great policy genius person, as well as Joe Biden, who I'm sure thought that the progressives, as they've done every other time, were just going to get in line. But it's really, really encouraging to see progressives take this hardline stance and say, no, we're not. We see what you're trying to do here, and we're not going to let you do it. We need this social spending package. We need guarantees that this social spending package will go through. And the only guarantee they have of that is if that goes through first. Do you think that this is going to potentially backfire on progressives?
I think it's more important to look at the fact that how far back can we be pushed? You know what I mean? Like, I don't see a situation in where we're getting less of our policies through.
That's fair.
Less of our preferred policies through past the moderate Red Rover line of the Democrats. So it's kind of just like anything's worth a shot at this point.
Red Rover, send $1 trillion over. Fuck you. Yeah, I think that this, the social spending package is something that really needs to happen, especially because, like, this is what's going to combat climate change, not the traditional infrastructure. In fact, traditional infrastructure is what's causing the problem.
Change. Yeah,
amongst plenty of other things, granted, but the traditional infrastructure is a very, very big polluter.
Yeah, I mean, it's our commitment to fossil fuels and non-renewable energy.
Exactly. One of the things that I'm concerned about, one of the things that I think this proves actually, is that the progressives and the Democrats and the moderate Democrats and the moderate conservatives and the far right conservatives all need their own party here. Mm-hmm. Because absolutely. Because this demonstrates that we can have left solidarity. This is 100 progressives, not socialists, 100 progressives with varying degrees of leftiness, all agreeing to this course of action. Is that, that's something that needs to happen.
Says a lot about it says a lot about the division in our party, but it also says a ton about the division in U.S. government. Like, our blind commitment to the two-party system is leading us down just the path to destruction fully.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just don't see any way you could argue that it's a good thing for us to retain it.
I mean, what it comes down to is it's a giant sporting event, right? Mm-hmm. It's the
Reds versus Blues. Yeah,
exactly.
It's the blue team versus red team. Dude.
Exactly. Like who you cheering on?
Yeah.
And that's not how politics should be. Politics should represent the pluralistic, ideas that we have across the country, because it currently doesn't. Mm-hmm. And I think that this particular spending package, or both these spending packages, highlights that fact that we need something fundamentally different.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Andrew Yang, I don't typically agree with Andrew Yang on a lot, but Andrew Yang tweeted this week, he's like, we need more than two parties. And I was like,
shocked Pikachu.
I mean, he said a little bit more than that, but I was like, yeah, he's absolutely right about this. So how do you think we begin transitioning away from the two-party system into into multiple parties?
You could psych up libertarians.
Could we not?
Not that they need to be psyched up at all. But what I mean by that, within that joke, that what I'm saying is start finding the different groups that would make up parties that aren't Republican or Democrat, and talk to them and empower them, because like ultimately we want people to have a voice, right?
Yep.
Regardless of if our voices agree, I want people to have a voice.
As long as they're not fucking fascists or racists.
Yeah. Well, I want them to have a little voice so I know who they are and I can just be like, nope.
Fair.
Yeah, you don't belong in society.
Get the fuck out.
Yeah. But like I truly do believe that, like, regardless of whether or not we agree on our politics, you 100% deserve representation, quality representation, and for your voice to be heard in the national conversation. What do
you think about these progressives just breaking off and saying, like, we are no longer going to identify with the progressive or with the Democratic Party if there was a mass party walkout?
So, I mean, I like the idea, obviously, but can you tell me what that would look like? Like, what would be the most likely plan of action for that group of people walking out of the Democratic Party? Like, I'm
just spitballing this based on the conversation that we're having, so yeah. I'd have to do a little bit more research as to what it takes, but it doesn't take a lot to form a party. So all it really takes is people and commitment to form a party. So what I would imagine this looking like is Pramila Jayapal and the rest of the progressives kind of taking a step back and just being like, we are no longer going to identify with the Democratic Party. We are going to break away, and we're going to literally file our own party and create our own party with our own, party apparatus and rules and regulations. There are plenty of other minor parties throughout the United States. The DSA, which I'm a member of, is one of those. The Green Party, the Libertarian Party, are all like actual political parties. But the difference here would be we have a group of people that are actively serving, that are breaking away from that main body of the Democratic policymakers. Now, I don't know that now that they're all elected officials.
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not they can legally do that. I don't know what laws. That's what I have to do.
That would be my question: is are there rules around changing your party when elected under the cloak of a party?
And that's probably state by state would be my guess, because I know that there are some positions in Washington that are called nonpartisan positions.
Yeah.
So but conceptually, do you think that the time is right to do something like that, or do you think that would end up backfiring and just reinforcing the two-party system? All these people get voted out of office and just replaced with a bunch of corporate Democrats.
I mean, it's very hard for me to tell what would happen to the people who made the move, but conceptually I think now's a great time to make a change, make an action like this. And when you have 100 people in current office who are like, hey, we're not down with this, you have traction there, and that's what you need to start. So,
and I think that it is doing this under a Democrat president, a president with a D next to their name, would be significantly more impactful than it would be under a president like Donald Trump or something.
Definitely. Well, the fact of the matter is like with a Republican president, if this were to happen during a Republican presidency, it would hurt our position considerably more than it will with a Democrat in the office, because the Democrat in the office needs all the votes he can get in Congress.
Yes, and well, beyond that, it would, if there was a Republican in office, the gettable moderate Dems that are part of the voting population, not part of the actual party apparatus, those would be less likely, I think, to allow that kind of risk to happen, because we saw this with the whole vote blue no matter who mentality in the Biden election, and I guarantee you whichever Republican gets elected next, when we go up and try to get them out of office, that's going to come up again, and it's going to be that constant thing where it's going to pull enough of the moderate Democrat population away from that. But if we have a Democrat in power, like in the presidency, we can then have a much clearer way of differentiating the progressive caucus and the more left-leaning caucus from the center Democrats. Obviously, Manchin and Sinema aren't too crazy about all this happening.
Two Republicans aren't crazy about the idea?
I mean, you do realize,
a couple of deep undercover Republicans don't like
Democrats, it? Yeah. No, Manchin and Sinema are
their ties are literally reversible, blue-red.
But the issue that they're running into is kind of they don't have power anymore, because a bunch of the progressives were just like, no, we're not letting the two of you run roughshod over the entire caucus.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that they're just essentially pulling a page out of Sinema's and just feeding them their own medicine.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool thing to see.
Absolutely.
So while Biden is, starting to say, okay, well, we're definitely going to have to see some movement on the social spending package. That's the 3.5 trillion as opposed to just one of them. I think one of the key things that we can see here is which moderate Democrats actually care about their constituents and which moderate Democrats are more like Manchin and Sinema. Obviously, the progressives are doing their thing here, but if you remember back to my reporting, you had those two kind of responses. One where it was like, well, as long as they both get passed, we're not tripping out about this too much. Like, whereas the other ones are like, no, the infrastructure must be passed first. What is your take on that?
I think, like you said, it's a great it's another line in the sand to where like you can look and see who's standing on which side of it and be like, okay, well, if somebody's running around here saying, if you're in support of getting that that social aspect of the bill through, then you give a shit about the people that you represent. If you're overly excited and focused about the infrastructure, the traditional infrastructure aspects of this bill, then you care way more about how this bill can benefit the corporations that are putting money into your pockets.
Exactly. That's the key point, right? Is that with that infrastructure spending, yes, there's going to be a lot that will trickle down to workers. There will be some that does in the form of jobs, but the vast majority is going to go to the construction conglomerates that are going to be responsible for these infrastructure improvements, and that's who those moderate Democrats are looking out for, not their constituents, when you're prioritizing just the infrastructure bill over the social spending. And it's important that both of these go through, but I'm very grateful to the Progressive Caucus for taking a stand where they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else you want to talk about on the story?
No, you know what I think would be really interesting? Like, this literally has no effect really as much on the story, but a corpo dem who decides which companies he or she has in their pockets based on worker-centric benefits. It's like you got to go all the way from the mouth of the snake to the asshole of the snake, but it's at some level he might care.
I mean, maybe.
This is a myth. This person doesn't exist.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is it would be interesting.
It would be interesting. I mean, you're getting into some of those things now with what was investment activism or whatever it's called. You know what I'm talking about? Where you have board members sitting on Exxon now that are like Greenpeace activists because they're trying to solve climate change via capitalism.
I think more what this daydream of mine represents is how far to the center we are, that I daydream about a corpo dem that actually deep down gives a shit. It's like never mind.
I mean, yeah, if you're saying we're on the conservative side of socialists, I mean, yes. I mean, but also
I don't like to separate our group that though.
Absolutely.
I hate putting because
left unity.
Yeah, exactly. Left unity for sure.
That's definitely something that I was trying to weave throughout the stories this week.
Yeah. It is so important though, that we have as many and as far left voices in these kind of conversations as possible, because that's what causes, I guarantee you this 100 people that decided to just say enough is enough didn't start with 100 people. It started with one voice convincing another voice, and having these voices in the conversation means that more and more people are going to be thinking like this, and more lawmakers are going to be thinking like this, and realizing that people who are loyal to their constituents are doing well and getting voted back in, and we're keeping them voted in because we know that they're looking out for us. And if more people get the message on that, we can change the narrative of leftist policymakers to hey, if you want to stay in office, the corporate money won't help you nearly as much as being loyal to your constituents will.
Especially because information about politics is so readily available these days. Like I can do a quick Google search and pull up your entire voting history. I don't have to go to the library or wherever, Library of Congress and anymore to be able to pull that information.
Yeah.
It's all readily available.
And hopefully the corpo Dems start to realize that their voters and their constituents are not stupid as these lawmakers think they are, and people every day are educating themselves more and more on all the lies that are being told from Washington D.C. and nobody's listening to that shit anymore.
And ultimately, I think that what we're potentially seeing here is a tiny, tiny little fracture in the two-party system. Fingers crossed, and that hopefully we can see this really, really start to split off into something more and something meaningful pushback against moderate neoliberal Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely.